I have been meditating on the idea of work for months now. Not work as in works of salvation or works of righteousness, but work as in occupation, vocation. And I have some contemplations that I want to share in that regard. Number one is that work is not a product of sin. In the last video I made about purpose and why we are here, I emphasized the importance of knowing that we were created by God and for God. I emphasized that man's chief purpose is to know the Lord, to enjoy him, and to be conformed to his image. This is the purpose under which everything else that we will do and become can have eternal weight. It is man's primary purpose and comes before everything else. However, it is important for us to not interpret this scriptural answer to the question of purpose as though God just means for us to sit back, fold our hands, live sterile lives while we wait for death to finally come and give us an escape out of here. No. Work is God's idea. It is not a result of sin. In fact, there are two ideas we can be certain were instituted by God before sin ever came on the scene. One is marriage and the other is work. The idea here is that before sin entered the world, all that existed in an active sense, at least in the sphere of man, was good. When God made the seas, the plants, the beasts, sun, moon, stars, man, all of it, God looked at everything that he had made, all the work that he had done, and he declared it good. So that even in giving man the responsibility to tend the garden and keep it, that also was good. The problem, however, is that since sin entered the picture, the concept of work has drastically shifted from what was God's original idea for the matter. When you hear the word work, the word that you almost always associate it to is survival. It's just the world that we live in. When you consider words like hustle and grind, you notice how they are both implicit with this idea that work is this tedious, unpleasant, thoroughly irritating thing that one just has to endure if he wants to survive. We are not necessarily taught to recognize or even appreciate the inherent dignity in work. Work is taught to you like something you have to bear so that you can get something else in exchange. Money, fame, security, health benefits, a new house, etc. It's the reason why if you stop an average young person on the road and try to strike up a conversation about working with them, they will almost always respond in the context of what they hope to have as a result of doing work and not necessarily about doing the work in itself. I want to become an engineer because engineers make a lot of money. I want to become a tech bro because, tech is where the money is at now. This is also why betting is a very successful enterprise, because it is seen as a quick escape out of the nasty idea that is work. If I could just hammer once and hammer big, I'll never have to work a day in my life again. It is why it's rapidly becoming popular among the young boys in our midst. Because there's a generation of older men that have not shown them that work has inherent dignity. That work is not the thing that defines their worth, but it's not something to be loathed. It's not something to seek a shortcut or a quick escape out of. They've not seen that. All they know, all that has been shown to them is that work equals survival and survival equals work. But God's inaugurating idea for work in Genesis 2 was not about survival. In fact, as paradoxical as it sounds, it was about rest. It was about man being where God needed him to be, doing what God needed him to be doing. The Bible says that the Lord himself took man and put him in the garden to tend it and keep it. God put man there. Man was resting in work, because rest does not necessarily mean the absence of labor. It just means the absence of labor in the flesh. If God tells you to run a marathon, as long as God said so and you are running on the strength of that instruction, you are in rest. So man was resting in work because the work that he was doing had God's blessing on it. After the fall of man, however, we see how things take a very drastic turn. Right from the moment God places a curse on the ground and says to man, "Cursed is the ground because of you. It is in pain that you will eat of it all the days of your life." So from that moment, work became no longer about rest or honoring God, but about survival. And that is the matter that we still have on our hands up until this day. It is either there's an extreme insouciance to work, where many find the idea of working irritating, loathsome, burdensome, depressing, annoying, or there's an extreme obsession with it, where Many make an idol out of their work, devoting their entire lives to their work, such that you don't even know where the work ends and where the person begins. Their work is their identity, and when they don't have their work, it feels like they don't have worth. But work is neither supposed to irritate us nor control us. Work is neither to be the bane of our existence nor the object of our every affection. Work has intrinsic good because God commands it. The point is not more complicated than this. As a matter of fact, the fact that work is a pre-fall idea tells us that God did not ever intend to have a world where people did not exert themselves in some kind of productive labor. God is the ultimate good. He is the definitive good. If the only one who has the prerogative to define and judge good says that work is good, you can see how it would be unwise to think that we know better than he does. To work, therefore, is to assume a hard posture of humility and to concede that God indeed is wiser than we are and greater than we are. It is a matter of obedience before it is a matter of anything else. This is point number one. I have been meditating on the idea of work for a bit, and I have some contemplations that I want to share. Number two, God is not enthusiastic about spiritual work and apathetic or indifferent about secular work. You know, there's a way we can think that God holds great regard for the work that pastors and missionaries do, but is detached from the work that the tailor does or the work that the data analyst does, because those jobs are not inherently spiritually profitable. There's no correlation or direct link between the tailor making clothes and the person wearing it going to heaven. Neither is the idea of crunching numbers fundamentally evangelistic in nature. If the pastor, on the other hand, does his job diligently and faithfully, God could use his labor to sanctify and ready hearts for heaven. The same thing goes for the missionary. So there's this idea floating around in our subconscious. Many of us are not even actively aware that we are thinking it, but it shows in our behavior that we believe it. This idea that God sees certain work as worthy, and so he cares much for it and is devoted to it. You know, the work of ministry, the work of preaching and teaching, the work of reaching the lost. These are the works that have eternal consequence. So they are the works that really mean something to God. While the worldly and mundane jobs like the banking job, the office assistant job, the plumbing job, the catering job, he sees these ones as unworthy, or at least not as worthy, and so is agnostic about how they are carried out. There is an operational deism of sorts that colors our theology of God and our theology of work in this way. This belief that God only cares for the big things. God only cares for those things that are directly consequential to my eternal destiny. So am I praying? Am I studying my Bible? Am I living a life of holiness? God cares about those things and holds me accountable for how I steward my spiritual life. But what about my 9 to 5? What about my small shop where I sell bags of cement? What about my tech startup? What about the creche and daycare center that I run? What about the beauty salon where I make hair and cut hair? What of my Zobo business? Does it have any worth or hold any weight in the eyes of God? Is my secular job just about me having a means of livelihood, or does it matter in some remarkable sense to God? Yes, I believe it does. I believe that your work or your job matters to God because people matter to God. And I believe that the fact that a job or work is of primarily earthly relevance does not make it insignificant in the eyes of God. Because to start with, God made the earth for man to indwell. And that means that he cares about the things that happen in it. God loves people. And nearly every secular work you can think of has a direct or indirect impact on the quality of people's lives. From the cleaner who cleans the hall where you conduct your banking transactions, to the surgeon who takes a tumor out of your brain, people are the object of work. And because people seriously matter to God, your work seriously matters to God. For the Christian who understands this, working can no longer then be merely about making profits or climbing up career ladders. working becomes so much more meaningful because he understands that my attitude towards the object of my work, which is people, is my attitude towards the God who made them and cares for them. This is why Paul said in Colossians 3:22-23, slaves, whatever it is that you do it with your heart as working for the Lord, not for human masters. Because the thing you do to the image bearer is the thing you are indirectly doing to the one whose image he bears. This is why Jesus wrapped up all the commandments and laws in these two, that you will love the Lord your God with all of your heart and you will love your neighbor as yourself. It's why he also said in Matthew 25 that whatever it is you do to the least of these ones, you are doing it to me. You are doing it for me. One of the significant consequences of this thing that I've just said is that no honest work can be looked down on. From the person in government who signs a bill that affects the way people live and trade in a nation, to the person who fixes the rip on your shirt, every honest, honorable work is meaningful. It is significant because at the end of that work is people, and at the end of people is God. Just as an aside, can you imagine what would happen if the government, if the waste management guys did not come to pick up the trash from your community in 1 month? Can you imagine the smell, the rodent infestation, the sickness? Do you see what I'm saying? Another significant consequence of what I've just said is that work cannot be done shabbily. Because you know that God is the indirect object of your work, you will render the kind of service that God deserves. You will not make a habit of coming to work late. You will not work for eye service. You will not be dubious or cunning with responsibilities that have been given to you at work. You will not promise A and deliver Q. You will deliver exactly the quality that you promised. And where you cannot, you will be honest and sincere. Work is for people, and people are for God. Therefore, work, good work, is for God. And in case it wasn't clear before, let me explain what I mean by good work. By good work, I mean every honest, honorable work done in the spirit of God, which is the spirit of love. Of course, that naturally eliminates fraud or any job that would require a person to be fraudulent, dishonest, or resort to tricks. This is point number 2.